I'm a well-known bad woman in the wealthy circles, and I fell for a distant and cold poor student. Since then, I've focused only on loving him. We kissed from the hallway to the couch, and as our passion deepened, just when we were about to go further, his phone rang. After checking his phone, he said he needed to take a shower. On a whim, I picked up the phone, which hadn't locked yet, and saw the wallpaper was a strange girl. The message read, "Calvin, I'm so cold. Want to come hug me?" The attached picture showed the girl in a revealing outfit, with her legs spread open. I immediately sent this image to their group chat. She's cold. Who's going to hug her? Chapter 1. The playful atmosphere evaporated instantly. Frowning, I scrolled through the chat history between Calvin and this girl. Reading from the beginning to the end, it turned out that they had been hooking up even when Calvin and I were together. During the day, Calvin would flirt with me, and late at night, he'd go to this girl's place. Is he not afraid of being drained dry? I kept scrolling through the messages. How's the bad woman taste? Did she drain you again today? Next time, let us try too. Anyway, Katerina's just a bus. What's the difference if one more person gets on? About that camera idea I mentioned earlier. Calvin, have you considered it? AI. Why are you guys talking like that? At least she's Calvin's girlfriend, so not only was he hooking up with other girls, but there was also a group I didn't even know about. Technology is advanced with dual systems, and now people are giving me dual systems too. One of Calvin's system wallpapers is me, and the other is this woman. I was shaking with rage, wiping my running nose. I quickly took a screenshot of the chat history and sent it to Calvin's and that girl's private group. She's cold. Who's going to hug her? The lively group chat went completely silent, except for one person who kept spamming reactions, trying to push the messages back up. As she spammed, I kept posting, "If you love to be shameless, let's go all the way." Katerina, what are you looking at? Chapter 2. Calvin walked towards me with a towel wrapped around his waist, and without a word, he pinned me down on the bed, roughly kissing my neck. As his breathing grew heavier, mine did too, but I knew he was just acting out of his teddy bear behavior. But I felt both anger and sadness. Calvin, I'm so cold. Can you hug me? Calvin instantly froze, propping himself up on his arms to look at me. What did you do to her? Without waiting for my answer, Calvin got up and grabbed his phone to check. After just a few glances, his cold face twisted with anger. Katerina, are you fucking crazy? The man who was once known for his unshakable composure now exploded in fury, with sparks in his eyes that could burn someone alive. I pushed down the bitterness rising in my chest and spoke defiantly. She's cold, so I found her a few more friends. What's the problem? Does it bother you? She's my junior. I've always treated her like a sister. How can you treat her like this? She's just a girl, and you're ruining her reputation? You think she's as promiscuous as you? What the hell are you? And who the hell is she? Calvin cursed while putting on his clothes, each word stabbing deep into my heart. Promiscuous? Is that how he saw me? Just some worthless woman in his eyes? It felt like my heart was being cut open with a blunt knife, each slice more painful than the last. She sent you those kinds of photos and you still think she's pure? How many times have you two been at it? Calvin paused for a moment, then glared at me, furrowing his brows in anger. How many times have we been together? It's the same as with you. Are you happy now? Bus. Let's break up. I've had enough of your spoiled princess temper. I was so furious I couldn't speak. A sharp pain shot through my stomach, and I weakly collapsed on the floor, breaking into a cold sweat from the pain. My stomach problem flared up. I bit my lip and weakly reached out a hand toward Calvin, desperately pleading. My stomach, it's acting up. Calvin, take me to the hospital. Calvin had already dressed and shot me a cold glance before heading for the door. Your acting skills are getting better and better. Don't think you can keep me with tricks like this. Even if you beg me on your knees, I won't even blink. Bang! The door slammed shut as Calvin left. The pain in my body made me curl up on the floor. I didn't even notice I had bitten my lip until I tasted the blood. Is this the man I've been loving for 3 years? As my consciousness blurred, I completely passed out. Chapter 3. My dad's a nouveau riche. and I'm his only daughter. So I've been spoiled rotten and allowed to do whatever I want. I like good-looking boys, and I pay them to be my boyfriends. I would change boyfriends almost every week, until I met Calvin. He was the poor student everyone knew at school, cold, aloof, and incredibly persistent, always ranking in the top 10 of his class. It wasn't just his academic excellence. He was also very handsome. When I first told him I wanted to pursue him, Calvin was as cold as ice, not even sparing me a glance. He just said one word, whatever. His cold arrogance struck right at my heart. That was when I decided to chase after him, and I pursued him for a whole year. During that year, I stayed disciplined, ignoring everyone else, including after we started dating. If Calvin didn't love me, why would he agree to be with me? And after all we've done, he never showed any sign of disgust. Chapter 4. Fortunately, the nanny came back to grab something and managed to rush me to the hospital just in time. After a day of rest, I felt much better and was preparing to leave the hospital. It's always those random coincidences in stories that seem to happen in real life. As soon as I stepped out, I saw a glaring scene. Calvin, thank you so much for coming to accompany me. The girl looked much purer than she did in her photos. She was wearing a white long dress, her black hair flowing down to her waist, and her features delicate and refined. She had a bit of a White Lotus vibe. She was nestled shyly in Calvin's arms, and when he wasn't looking, she secretly stood on tiptoe to kiss him on the cheek, then quickly turned her head away. Calvin looked slightly dazed for a moment, then smiled softly, his fingers gently tracing the spot where she had kissed him, unwilling to let it go. What a picture-perfect couple, if only I didn't know their true colors. Is that Katerina, sister? As soon as the girl saw me, she quickly hid behind Calvin, her eyes filled with fear as she looked at me, like I was some kind of monster. Calvin's lips, which had been slightly curled in a smile, dropped instantly. His eyes were cold, with no warmth. What are you doing here? Are you stalking me now? Katerina, can you stop being so disgusting? If you die right now, I still won't forgive you. Forgive me? Forgive what? Ever since Calvin left me, my once passionate heart no longer beats for him. The two of them started their performance, as if they were actors on stage. Calvin, you shouldn't be so mean to sister. She just likes you too much. Her love is too dirty. I don't want it. Calvin continued, staring at me, his words cutting through me. If you kneel and apologize now, I might still forgive you. At the peak of my anger, I actually laughed. Apologize for what? She's cold, so I found some people to hug her. What's wrong with that? You should be thankful. Not acting like this for whose sake? Katerina, how could you say that about my brother? And you, pretentious coquette. My mother only gave birth to me. I never had a sister. If you try to climb into our family, I swear I'll slap you. As soon as I finished, the girl started crying uncontrollably on the spot. She grabbed Calvin's arm, sobbing dramatically. If I hadn't noticed her 34A bust rubbing against his arm, I might have believed she was just having a simple emotional breakdown. How cheap. I used to be just like her. How could I not see through this act? But I stopped using these tricks 5 years ago. Men love this kind of thing. Just a little touch. Calvin stormed over and slapped me across the face. Say another word and see what happens. I turned my head and licked the blood from the corner of my mouth. I had been hoping for a peaceful resolution. Now, I was truly furious. Chapter 5. Calvin always acts so high and mighty, but in private, he's a total jerk. Loves to hit people? Calvin stared at the hand that had just slapped me. His eyes panicked as he looked at me and explained, Katerina, I didn't mean to. Does it hurt? He stepped closer to me, but I took a few steps back, rejecting him. Katerina, let me check how bad it is. I'll get you an ice pack. I scoffed. You've already hit me. Now you're pretending to care? Such fake nobility. His steps faltered, and he looked at me helplessly. Katerina, I really didn't mean to. Let me take you to ice it. Calvin, my stomach hurts so badly. Can you take me to see a doctor? The girl suddenly screamed, clutching her stomach in apparent agony. So who are you going to choose? It didn't matter who he chose. It wouldn't change the fact that my heart had already ended with him. The next moment, without hesitation, Calvin walked over and picked the girl up in his arms. A rare hint of guilt appeared on his beautiful face. And he didn't even dare to look at me. Katerina, I'll take Luna to the hospital first. I'll bring you the ice pack afterward. As the girl left, she shot me a smug glance. I watched them walk away. No need. Calvin stumbled, almost falling. In that moment, he seemed to realize that something was slipping away. He couldn't help but look back. The crowd behind him was bustling, but the one person who used to stand proudly was now gone. Chapter 6. When I got home, I immediately told my mom to stop the financial support for Calvin. Our school is one of the top 3 in the country, with abundant educational resources. But the tuition fees are extremely high. Calvin's scholarship was nowhere near enough to cover the cost, and it was I who had asked my mom to provide anonymous financial support for him. Looking back, it was truly laughable. I had treated him like a delicate treasure, worried about hurting his pride. And yet, he treated me like a fool. Katerina, can I move up? A stranger's account suddenly popped up, one I had never spoken to. It was time for me to get back into the game. Send over the health checkup results first, and then I'll consider. In the next moment, a few pictures were sent. I smiled slightly, intrigued. I just had this done yesterday. Don't worry. It's very clean. I know what you want. Yes. I was the type of woman who could fall for anyone I met, but I was also afraid of getting sick, so I always made sure the men I saw were properly checked out. I quickly sent an address. Go to this place and do it again. Could this person be trusted not to fake it? I preferred going to a familiar hospital with people I knew. The man didn't refuse, and instead, he sent over a video. He looked delicate. His face seemed fragile, but his body was decent. The video showed him shirtless, twisting the cap off a bottle with his abs. A bit greasy, but his face was good. I casually updated my WeChat status. Almost immediately, a familiar profile picture liked my post, then quickly withdrew the like, pretending to be high and mighty. Chapter 7. If nothing's wrong, you shouldn't join too many random groups. Soon, I found myself being criticized in a group that had nothing to do with me. Katerina, what are you pretending to be? You got Calvin and now you're ignoring him? Do you even count as a woman? She says she's settling down for love, but she's just lying. Thought nobody was keeping an eye on Calvin. Huh? You're just a nouveau riche who got picked up by a cultured man. Now you better keep your place and stop acting like a public bus. I heard she pissed Calvin off. Could she be trying to get his attention with this kind of stunt? Yeah, her reputation's already ruined. Who would want a woman like her except for Calvin? Who has a good heart? She probably paid someone to piss Calvin off. I think it's good that Calvin's away from this woman. She used her family's influence to force him into a relationship. Now he's finally free. We should throw a party to celebrate. I quickly skimmed through the messages. The ones leading the charge were the same people who used to make dirty jokes in Calvin's small group. They relied on Calvin to pass exams and barely scraped through. To them, Calvin was more important than their own fathers. This world is strange. When a man sleeps with many women, it's considered a boastful achievement, a conversation piece that brings him status. But when a woman sleeps with many men, she's considered disgraceful. No, it's not even about numbers. Once a woman loses her first, she becomes the target of attack. They pressure women with words like disgraceful, immoral, and shameless. They love to see women cry, hiding at home, too ashamed to face anyone. But I wasn't going to be that kind of woman. I quickly typed a response. Don't pretend to be holier than thou. Do you all know who Luna is? Calvin cheated on me, and I didn't even seek revenge. That's how much face I'm giving him. Yeah, I'm from a nouveau riche family. We may not have culture, but we're rich. What about you? Your families run small businesses, right? Nouveau riche people may not be cultured, but we know how to cause some trouble. You'd better be ready to kneel and apologize to your parents. Oh, and since you love calling people public buses, why don't you record a video, call yourself a bus, and beg me for forgiveness? Then maybe I'll let your little business off the hook. By the way, anyone willing to be my dog? can get $50,000 a month. First come, first served. The group went into another round of judgment against me, and after I left, the friend requests kept coming in nonstop, especially one from a person who loved to insult their own mother. Mom, I'm your little dog. Punish me. Chapter 8. The next day, after waking up, I sent a message to my private detective and then headed out to meet my new boyfriend. This man, I knew well. His name was Samuel, the fourth-ranked top student, and also Calvin's sworn rival. It seemed like Calvin was always on top, but in reality, the professors and upperclassmen favored Samuel much more. During a recent basketball match, Calvin lost to him and threw quite a tantrum. I had to buy him an expensive tie just to calm him down. What a fool I was. It didn't take long to meet Samuel. He was far more considerate than Calvin. As soon as he saw me, he pulled out a chair for me and hung up my coat. Katerina, you finally arrived. Samuel courteously sat beside me, serving me food and pouring drinks. TSK, much more pleasant to look at. I must have been out of my mind to think about some high and mighty figure. A cute little puppy is much better. You knew I broke up with Calvin, and we've only met a few times. Are you here for the 500,000? Samuel looked at me in confusion, his fair face flushing bright red, stammering as he spoke. What 500,000? I don't know anything about that. Do you believe in love at first sight? I propped my elbow on the table, resting my chin on my hands, watching him with great interest. Are you saying you fell in love with me the moment you saw me? I've heard that excuse a million times. It's much more honest to just admit you're after the 500,000. In the next second, Samuel jumped up, his face serious. No, it's really love at first sight. But back then, you were with Calvin, so I purposely went against him. I was jealous that he could be liked by you without even doing anything. While he still doesn't cherish you, don't you realize he treats other women better than he treats you? I thought about it carefully, and it was true. He was polite and considerate with other women, but with me, he would often lose his temper, accusing me of insulting him with money. How foolish women become when they let love cloud their judgment. It's better to indulge your desires instead. I never hold back. I reached out, pulled Samuel closer, and kissed him. Samuel quickly reacted, kissing back, trying to take control. I pushed the dishes aside, took charge, and pinned him down on the table, letting my desires take over. We kissed passionately, unwilling to separate. Our clothes were gradually coming off, and if I hadn't remembered that this was a dining place, I would have already gone all the way with Samuel. While I was catching my breath, Samuel smirked. Is that it? Should I take over? I smiled, running my hands over his firm abs. I'm afraid if we keep going, I won't be able to control myself. Samuel chuckled softly. Katerina, are you afraid of this? I thought the school's so-called big devil was fearless. Chapter 9. Calvin, this restaurant is so expensive. Won't you feel like you're overspending? The atmosphere was so intimate, but someone had to ruin the moment. From outside, I heard the familiar voice of Luna, followed by the voices of Calvin's friends. Luna, don't worry. Katerina kept a card just to keep Calvin. You can eat all you want. The money's on her. Exactly. Luna, you're just too kind. Always thinking of others. Now that Calvin is free from that loose woman, this single party is a great opportunity for you. Luna, you have to seize the moment. Hey, what are you guys saying? So they plan to use my card to show off. Hiss, did they think Calvin didn't know that I already canceled the card? This was going to be fun. Katerina, you really care about him. The man under me was not pleased. He pressed me down on the table and bit my neck hard. It hurt, and I couldn't help but curse at him. But he just grinned. He said something about punishing me. I smiled knowingly and continued kissing him. A few minutes later, I shoved him off. If I didn't stop now, this would have gone too far. Samuel looked at me, still wanting more, his face full of unmet desire. Like a dog, I gently kicked him, but he grabbed my foot. Seeing that he was about to try something again, I couldn't hold back anymore. It's over. Settle down. Samuel immediately released me, looking worried. Did I make you angry? I ignored him and transferred him 10,000 yuan. I couldn't stand men who lacked boundaries. Impatiently, I got dressed and prepared to leave when my phone rang. I smiled. This restaurant required you to pay after the food was served. Calvin and his friends probably didn't have enough to pay for the meal. So now they were thinking of me. Chapter 10. Katerina, what the hell are you doing? Calvin lowered his voice deliberately, afraid someone might overhear that he was still asking women for money. He wanted to act all high and mighty, but still needed money to spend. How could he expect such a deal? I flat out rejected him. Calvin immediately got furious, his voice low but seething with anger. Katerina, do you think playing these tricks will make me go back to you? Stop being so childish. Unless you beg me, I won't forgive you. Send me 100,000 right now, or I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life. Normally, I would only order dishes worth 1,000 yuan when dining here, but Calvin went straight for the 100,000. Now that I wasn't his ATM anymore, I was very curious how he was going to pay. The thought made me laugh out loud. That laugh cut straight into Calvin's pride, like a needle stabbing deep into his heart. He immediately flew into a rage. Katerina, do you think your little bit of money makes you impressive? Fine, I'll pay with my scholarship. I really look down on you rich people who try to act all high class with a few pennies. I kindly reminded him. You still haven't paid for your tuition this year. Shouldn't you have taken that scholarship money already? The frantic tapping of the screen on the other end of the line could be heard. A minute later, Calvin completely lost it. He stopped lowering his voice and yelled angrily. Katerina, what the hell have you done with my money? I just stopped the funding I was giving you. Before I could finish, Samuel wrapped his arms around my waist, his lips against my ear, interrupting me. His voice carried both smugness and a hint of teasing. The phone on the other end fell silent for a moment, before Calvin's voice exploded. Who is he? Katerina, have you really gone this far? Is there anyone you won't sleep with? Do you really think you can have every man? Samuel continued to provoke him. When you guys were ordering, Katerina already cleaned me up in the next room. There are a lot of people who want to take your place, but you're already out. I couldn't help but smile at this. Calvin immediately hung up the phone, and within moments, he barged into the room, kicking open the door. The waiter quickly apologized. I waved my hand, signaling for them to go about their business. Calvin's eyes were bloodshot. His teeth gritted in fury. Katerina, how could you really cheat on me like this? Chapter 11. Luna cupped her hands over her mouth, pretending to be surprised. Oh my, Katerina, what are you doing here? Having an affair with a man? You don't look like a decent girl at all. You didn't do it, did you? Her words successfully provoked Calvin. He rushed over, trying to punch Samuel. Thankfully, Samuel reacted quickly and fought back. Calvin didn't get his venting out. Instead, he was the one who ended up getting hit. His sycophants only barked, with no intention of helping. I looked at one of them and sneered. What? You came to visit your mother today? That shut him up instantly. It was laughable. Calvin, lying on the ground, wiped the blood from his mouth and looked up. His brow furrowed. Katerina, the more you do this, the less I'll ever love you. When will you stop deceiving yourself? Do you think she's that kind of woman who just needs a man? His words might have been crude, but they weren't entirely wrong. Katerina could never like you. She chased after me for a whole year, even after the 3 years we were together. How could she not love me after 4 years? So it had been 4 years. Seeing my stunned expression, Calvin thought he had hit the mark. His panicked face returned to its indifferent mask, and his gaze became even more determined as he looked at me. No woman can easily let go of 4 years of feelings. Katerina is just trying to win me back. I raised my hand and pointed at Luna. Didn't you have your own 4 years with me? What do you think of her? At these words, every gaze in the room turned to Calvin. He lowered his head, lost in thought, before slowly getting up from the ground. We can continue being together. I can still treat Luna like a sister. Chapter 12. Calvin looked guilty, avoiding eye contact with Luna. Luna laughed out loud, but this time her laughter lacked the previous smugness. Instead, It was filled with a sense of bitterness, the kind that came from years of hidden suffering. She wiped away a tear from the corner of her eye, trying to suppress her anger as she spoke. A sister? Would you do that kind of thing with your sister? You keep saying that Katerina used her family's power to force you into it. But the truth is, you're just reluctant, aren't you? Playing both women like fools must be so enjoyable for you. Since you and I broke up, I've been waiting for you to give me a title, but until now, I'm still just the invisible mistress. I can be the invisible one, but I don't want my child to be invisible. Everyone froze, instinctively looking at her stomach. I just felt disgusted. It was a disgust so strong it made me physically ill. I remembered Calvin's words. He had been with me as many times as he had been with her. I thought he was just trying to provoke me, but it was true. And he even used the excuse of being siblings. How revolting. Just as I was about to vomit, a hand with long, knobby fingers handed me a glass of water. It was Samuel. I didn't have time to say thank you, but I drank it all in one go, feeling a little better. Samuel, as always, kindly patted my back. This scene seemed to strike Calvin like a dagger to the heart. Don't touch her, the man screamed in agony, his voice torn, so loud that he had to bend over. Luna wasn't having any of it. She stormed forward, grabbing Calvin's shoulder and slapped him twice. Today, you have to choose between me and her. Calvin was dazed, glancing back and forth between the two of us. People are always greedy. Once they have something, they can't let go of the other. I spoke up at the right moment. This isn't some two-choice situation. My eyes have long been healed, and there's no man I can't have. It's better if you two lock it down. Luna was desperate for an answer, urgently asking, hurry, choose. Do you want me and the baby, or that woman? Calvin shook his head. I don't know. I'm going to get rid of the baby right now. Without another word, Luna turned and ran out. Calvin snapped out of his daze and chased after her. A few of his sycophants tried to follow but were stopped by the waiter. Mom, can you lend me some money? I didn't even spare them a glance as I walked out of the restaurant. Later, I heard that they had called every friend they knew but couldn't get a loan, so they ended up calling their families. After a roundabout, they finally settled the bill. From then on, they saw Calvin as an eyesore. They posted over 10 videos cursing him out, which eventually got his account banned, and only then did it all end. But I think they forgot one thing. Chapter 13. I had spent a week with Samuel, and when I got home, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. Calvin, reeking of alcohol, staggered toward me, throwing himself at me. Katerina, will you come back, please? What was going on now? I wasn't in a rush to go home. Instead, I casually sat on the bench, watching Calvin with some interest. I remembered a post I had seen online. Calvin had been working at a bar to supplement his income, only to be noticed by a 40-year-old wealthy woman who forced him to drink 10 bottles of liquor. If no one had passed by, he probably wouldn't have known what would happen to him. Now he had suffered, and was remembering me. But I, Katerina, never go back to the past. I quietly watched him put on his self-made show. Calvin poured the drink all over himself, the liquid dripping from his hair down his face, his cold cheek turning slightly red. He squatted in front of me, eyes dazed. Katerina, is it really you? Did I make you sad? He gently took my hand and placed it on his face. In that moment, Calvin didn't look like a proud, untouchable man at all. He looked like a tail-wagging dog waiting to be pampered again by its owner. He was obedient, pitiful, and almost endearing. He started rubbing his face against my hand, imitating a cat. Katerina, I miss you so much. Why don't you like me anymore? The response he got was 2 harsh slaps. Calvin, a grown man, was sent crashing to the ground by me. I crossed my legs leisurely, speaking slowly. Do you think you're something precious? This bag in my hand is worth 30,000, and you aren't even worth as much as it. Calvin, what's with this devoted lover act? Calvin's pupils dilated as he stared at me, opening his mouth but unable to speak. Realizing he was in the wrong, I was about to leave when suddenly, my calf was tightly grabbed. I looked down at Calvin, feeling a bit helpless. Who are you pretending for? Calvin became anxious. Katerina, I can change for you. I'll be whatever you want. Please, please, don't leave me. His voice cracked, softer than I had ever heard it, full of weakness. Seeing that I wasn't responding, he continued pleading, "Do you like dogs? I can be one." "She wouldn't like a dog," came Samuel's voice from behind, stepping out from the house. Chapter 14. Samuel quickly wrapped his arms around my waist and pulled me away from Calvin. Calvin glared at Samuel with venom, no longer pretending to be drunk as he got up from the ground. "You're just a thief taking advantage of the situation. Who do you think you are?" Samuel shook me slightly in his arms and whistled provocatively. "Maybe it's because I'm young and full of energy?" "You." Calvin gritted his teeth, and I could practically hear the grinding sound from his rage. He took a deep breath, his eyes firm as he looked at me. "Katerina, whether you believe it or not, I truly love you. She's just an accident. If you won't forgive me, I'll stay here on my knees." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "An accident? Huh? And now there's a child involved?" I couldn't help but snicker. Samuel, as if receiving a reward, planted a kiss on my cheek. Calvin's body stiffened, and he closed his eyes, slowly kneeling down. That one knee took away whatever little pride he thought he had left. I casually took a photo and posted it on the campus wall. If Calvin liked kneeling, then let him kneel. I didn't stop him from getting up. Chapter 15. The maid told me that Calvin had left after kneeling for less than an hour. He really had no patience. Aside from him, there were many others who wanted to kneel. I admit that I have a rather underhanded nature, and I hold grudges. I quickly sabotaged the small shops of Calvin's lackeys. I found a few people to open stores right across from theirs, selling at prices 1 yuan lower than theirs. No matter how much they sold, my prices would always be 1 yuan lower. I had plenty of money, so I wasn't afraid of losses. Their families couldn't hold out for long. They sent their son to apologize to me. "I'm the bus. I'm the bus." Hearing them kneel and shout those words made me feel extremely satisfied. Some of them had bloodshot eyes, wanting to kill me, but in the end, they still had to obediently beg me for mercy. They yelled until their throats went hoarse. When night fell, I showed mercy and let them go. "If you want to curse me, do it privately. Whoever lets it reach my ears will regret it." The few of them, like stray dogs, ran off with their tails between their legs. As I entered the house, I saw Samuel hurriedly locking his phone screen. Chapter 16. Katerina. "You let them go so quickly?" Looking at the panic on the handsome man's face, his eyes shifting nervously, I suddenly understood. I didn't say much, just transferred 50,000 to Samuel. "Katerina, what? What are you doing?" "To be honest, I'm quite satisfied with you. Not just in that way. You also helped me anger Calvin. Plus, with this 50,000, you should have around 200,000 by now. No need to come by again." How could I not recognize what it feels like to love someone? At that time, I just needed someone to divert my feelings for Calvin, even if he wasn't sincere. What did it matter? As long as he was clean, like I said, I was really satisfied with him. I had even considered taking things further, but his actions just now were too insincere. I didn't want to allow myself to wear another hat. Taking the money and leaving was his best option. Samuel originally wanted to protest, but when he saw my cold expression, he swallowed his words. When Samuel and I broke up, somehow, everyone found out. My friend requests were flooded, and I had to turn off the permissions, which made it a little easier. Calvin sent me messages begging for forgiveness, but I mercilessly rejected him. I mentioned this to a younger female friend who was close to me. She told me that Calvin stood out in the rain on the sports field shouting that he loved me, and the next day he fell sick. He was so fragile that he seemed like he might break at any moment. He had a high fever and kept calling my name in his sleep. Many girls were moved by his deep affection and posted about it, criticizing me. I immediately posted Calvin. I'm so cold from that day, and the voices condemning me disappeared. Did Calvin love me? I didn't know, but one thing I was sure of. He wasn't regretting his wrongdoings. He was just being drowned in the money I had poured on him over the years, leaving him confused and disoriented, unfamiliar with the feeling of poverty. A person can endure hardship for a long time, but once they've tasted sweetness, it's hard to go back to hardship. He had been humiliated while working, and that heart of his couldn't take it anymore. It was far easier to bow his head to a woman than to a group of people. He pretended to regret his actions, acting as if he was deeply in love, but it was all for my money. Did he think he could get me to thank him for a few performances? He was wrong, terribly wrong. Soon enough, he would realize that I not only woke up quickly, but I could turn my face even faster. Chapter 17. Calvin's scandal about replacing another student in an exam quickly became a hot topic. For an entire week, it dominated the trending charts. Everyone was condemning him, urging the school to take action. The student who had been replaced immediately filed a lawsuit against him. Calvin's academic fans, once unwavering in their admiration for him, were furious. They wanted to kill this imposter who had stolen someone else's life. When the private investigator told me about this, I was shocked. Calvin was an outstanding student, but he made a mistake on the most important exam. His parents, ruthless as they were, decided to have their son replace a relative's child. Cold and detached, Calvin knew everything. Yet he didn't stop his parents. He could have chosen to retake the exam the next year, but he couldn't escape the pressure of maintaining his reputation. From childhood to adulthood, the title of a genius student had become a shell that trapped him, trapping both him and his parents. When this scandal was exposed, Calvin felt deeply embarrassed and humiliated. A few times, he took pills and had to be rushed to the hospital. He begged me for help, but at that time, I was too busy catching male models at a party to care about him. The impoverished academic genius fell from grace overnight. Later, the person who had been replaced withdrew the lawsuit, and Calvin disappeared. I had seen him once. At the time, I was kissing a male model, completely absorbed in the moment. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Calvin. He was lying on the ground, wearing nothing but shorts, being dragged like a dog into the elevator. The woman with him was the same rich lady who had previously caused trouble for Calvin at the bar. She nodded at me, and I gave her a brief acknowledgement. After all, if they ended up together, I was partly responsible. I've always been a person who gets even. Calvin had cheated on me, slapped me, and now look at his fate. That woman, Luna, provoked me and even tried to put the blame on me. Of course, I couldn't let her off the hook either. At that time, when Luna said she was going to abort the child, Calvin couldn't catch up with her. She went home and did it alone. But the news of her affair had already spread throughout their neighborhood. Luna's parents had no choice but to marry her off to a distant relative. That man was abusive, hitting her even when she was pregnant. Luna had 2 miscarriages because of the beatings and couldn't get pregnant again. The man, blaming her for the misfortune, hit her even harder. Luna still called Calvin for help when her husband wasn't home. But unfortunately, her lover was useless. Aside from pretending to be morally superior, he was good for nothing. After several years of torment, Luna no longer resembled the delicate flower she once was. She had gained a lot of weight, lost most of her hair, and had deep, heavy eye bags. Luna no longer complained of being cold. Every day was a struggle to survive. Marriage was the gift I gave to Luna. When we met again, she looked like a middle-aged woman in her 40s. While I was still fresh and young, like I was 18, she kneeled before me, apologizing, saying that when she was younger, she didn't know any better and had made a mistake. After years of suffering, she had finally learned her lesson. I, being soft-hearted, helped her get a divorce. Damn, my heart was as cold as stone. Though, at least Luna didn't betray me. She opened a small stall selling Kanto-style hot pot. Every day, she would ask me if I wanted some, offering it for free. At first, I suspected she might poison me, but after eating a few times, I gradually let go of my worries. These past few years, my father had been busy growing the family business. I finally got together with the male celebrity I had long admired. Being in love was great. As for marriage, that was completely unnecessary. Chapter 18. Extra Luna. Looking back, I realize how foolish I was when I was younger, making myself suffer all for a man. I had once hated Katerina, wondering how she could be so heartless. But as I got older, That hate dissipated with the wind. What good did hate do me? Could hate be eaten as food? And the truth was, I was the one who had done wrong. Since Katerina took over her father's company, she had become busier and busier. She could barely reply to messages these days. I stared at the carefully decorated restaurant in a daze. Who would have thought that enemies could become friends? She even helped me open this big restaurant. Little pretentious coquette. I'm exhausted. Make me some noodles with tons and tons of meat, she called out. I immediately replied, got it. Life alone wasn't so bad. After all,